Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the presentation. And before I get started tonight, I just want to say thanks to Fine. Fine is the sponsor of tonight's presentation. They're best known for their cable railing systems, but they do a whole host of architectural hardware and other systems. And you can find out more about them at fineinc.com. So as you all know, tonight's presentation is on designing outdoor spaces with a focus on connecting your home to its surroundings. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. I'll let Tina get to that in a minute, but you all probably know that tonight's webinar is by Raleigh, North Carolina architect Tina Govan, who is the principal of her own architecture firm, Placemaking Studio in Raleigh. She's been a longtime contributor to Fine Homebuilding magazine, and if you've read any of her magazines, you'll know that she has a keen understanding of how to make the most of spaces and materials to make a house both more functional and more comfortable, specifically focus on connecting it to its surroundings. I don't really want to talk too much more about it because I think Tina has a lot to say about that tonight, and I'll pass the mic over to Tina. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I have a long relationship with Fine Homebuilding. Happy to be here. And as Rob said, I've been principal of my own studio here in Raleigh, North Carolina for almost 30 years. So I'm excited to begin. Shall we jump in?
Sounds good.
Okay. Here we go. Okay, so the focus of tonight's webinar is extending the, let me get this going again. There we go. Your home to the outside and connecting to where you live. And I want to just start by addressing the question of, why this is important. I've always designed from the site perspective, connecting to the outdoors. And it's for this reason that you can have outdoor living spaces like this, so that you can have dinner on your front porch and have these wonderful in-between spaces where you can spill outside and expands the square footage of your home. And too often, there are homes like this one, I think, and this is in the same neighborhood. And even though it has the same amount of outdoor space available to it, it doesn't take advantage of it the way the other home does. And I think it's a shame, because the outdoor space is really one of our most valuable untapped assets in a lot of home designs. And this is a house where you're either inside or outside, and you really wouldn't feel comfortable sitting on the front lawn having dinner there. And it's too bad. So you sort of feel trapped inside. And these kinds of spaces are really much less expensive to build than interior heated square footage. So you get such a bang for your buck. You get a lot more out of it, out of the money you put in, if you build these in-between spaces. So it's too bad when I see this kind of confined box living. When you know that there's so much living that can be done outside. You can have playing, showering, even bathing outside. And porches are really wonderful because they are so open to interpretation. They can be whatever you want them to be and be used in so many different ways. And during the pandemic, I've seen some really creative uses of porches. This is my neighbor, where he uses his front porch as a kind of exercise room during the day, among other things. And it's become really valuable to people now to have these spill out spaces and have the chance to use them in whatever way they'd like. Like this one is a kind of living room that is all decked out in even paintings and fine furniture, and I've even seen upholstered couches. And I live in a neighborhood that's really populated with porches, so it's been wonderful to see the whole range of ways in which they've been inhabited and used. Dining rooms is another use for porches, which is, I think, a wonderful thing to be able to wave to people as they're eating dinner outside. And these outdoor rooms save interior square footage. This is a house I designed where the bedrooms are really pretty small. They're less than 100 square feet. But because one of them opens up to a back patio and the front one opens up to a front porch, it doesn't feel that small. So it really is a money saver. Compared to a room that has no access to the outside, these really you can get away with a smaller size. So because you feel that choice, that ability to spill outside, to open the door, and the outdoor space is kind of part of your room. So you feel a sense of freedom and expansion by being able to spill outside. And I don't think people often realize that you can really they really do benefit you in terms of designing a small home. And again, like during the pandemic, these kinds of outdoor spaces have been a kind of pressure relief valve from being cooped up inside, being homebound, and especially for small homes and for big families. And this is a family near me. I think they've got 5 or 6 kids, and they're always out on the front porch, spilling outside, even climbing out of windows. And you could sense, the cooped upness if they were just confined inside during the pandemic. And so this is a really wonderful space that allows them to deal with being stuck at home. So these spaces, of course, offer us choice. You don't have to just hang out inside. You can hang out outside. Or any place in between. And that choice is really wonderful. It's a real gift of freedom and a way to inhabit your lot in so many different ways. So extending outside allows you to take full advantage of your site and experience all parts of it. So if there's no real comfortable place to be outside, you're limited to how you really appreciate and experience the land that you've built on. So I think making places all around you up to your property line is really important in terms of exploiting your full property and understanding your neighborhood. This is a house that does that, I think, really well, that I designed, that is has got the front porch, has got a side patio, a back patio, a roof deck. It was all designed around really exploiting this tight urban lot in a fairly dense downtown neighborhood. And you move up through the house as you would the site. You climb up from the side patio to this back patio with double doors on to the kitchen, dining, and living area. And then you go up those steps, half are outside, and then it continues inside, and you go up to a roof deck. And up there, you experience the site and the neighborhood in a whole new way. You're up in the treetops, you have distant views of the neighborhood, of the nearby park. And in this area, it's really rare to get that kind of expansive feeling in your house. And then from that roof deck, you can look down into the street, and the street's really dense. And so it really does integrate house and site and use every square inch. And ever since then, more roof decks have appeared on our block. This, I think, started a trend because the experience is so different from down on the sidewalk. So you really move three-dimensionally throughout the site and the house. And these outdoor spaces, of course, connect us with nature and the change of seasons, weather, and passage of time. And this is our front porch, which, especially during COVID, and we've all spent a lot of time on. And it's wonderful because you sense the change of seasons and you see what's blooming, and whether it's the season for the carpenter bees to show up, or whether it's the time of year when the hummingbirds appear, or if the little green lizard anoles are out, and if it's fall or it's spring, or if there's a storm coming, or if the morning sun is coming in, or the afternoon, and then so that connection with nature is something that you get when you hang out in spaces like this, versus just experiencing them through a window. It's not the same. You feel the temperature, the breeze, all of it. So that kind of direct connection with the natural world around you is something I think that we all crave and need. And of course, outdoor spaces connect us to people. And again, during COVID, from balconies to porches, they allow us to connect to each other. And again, in my neighborhood, I've seen so many creative ways that people have gotten together socially, and they've been able to do it because they have these kinds of spaces built into their homes. They have porches. So people like this woman bringing wine and sitting on the front patio while her friends are up a few steps on the porch and having fun together, or this other family singing from their front porch, or this is an Italian man on his balcony. I mean, all these are really healthy ways to connect, and we can only do it because we've got these kinds of spaces. And in our neighborhood, it's really expanded to become venues really for home concerts. With everyone stuck at home, this is one of the few ways that we could connect with each other. And these concerts have really grown in scope and audience members, and gotten more and more elaborate. We've got the North Carolina Symphony members playing and singing, and the audience has taken over sidewalks. Some of it spilled out on the street, onto the yards across the street even. But it's been really healthy for our neighborhood to be able to come together like this. So these porches have been lifesavers during COVID. And porches, of course, I'm in love with them. They allow you choice with how much you want to connect with people socially or not. You can just choose to just be outside and bury your nose in a book, or have a conversation with a passing neighbor. So they really are this handshaking zone between inside and outside, between public and private. And you have that choice of where you want to be along that spectrum, if you really want to connect with people or retreat back into your house. So having that choice of how much you want to reach out, I think, is really important for us in how we live together. So I really see these porches and these spaces as the lungs of a house. Connecting the individual with the community, the inside and the outside, the private and the public, and make it really more comfortable to live in your home. In this neighborhood, they've got a whole series of porches that line up along the same zone. So then you get another kind of community happening when people are talking to each other from one porch to the other. And the size is also very important. So these folks have a very generous porch that allows them to have dinner, but if it were just, and this must be 7 feet or so wide, but if you were to squeeze it down to 3 or 4 feet, then you couldn't do this. So of course the size determines the use. So I think to make a humane kind of way of living, we really need these soft zones, that are permeable from inside to out, and allow us to connect. I've seen these porches kind of rendered in more modern homes, and realized that the size, proportion, and degree of enclosure in relation to the street are all really important. So here's an old bungalow sitting next to a more modern home, which I think is much less successful. The sheltered, enclosed feeling of the bungalow porch, in my opinion, works much better, where the other one is not really got the dimension where you could hang out and do much. The ceiling is too high, so rain would come in. And so they're very different. And it also feels very disconnected from the street. So it's important to pay attention to these details. And here's another one I think was maybe a little bit more successful, but still it doesn't have much of an enclosure feel. It's sort of a platform. I would feel more comfortable out there with a roof, and you could be there different times of year. But and it feels just a little bit too exposed. I think thinking about making outdoor rooms, it has to have, like any room, a proper proportion and sense of enclosure. And it applies to porches like anything else. So here is an example, another example of the social role of outdoor spaces in homes. This is a family that was frustrated at not having a playground or place to gather and meet other kids and families. And so they just decided to turn their front yard into a playground and paint their driveway. And this is Mike Lanza. He has a whole book about this, and he calls it Playborhood, and he puts up signs, invites his neighbors and their friends over, several times a week. And so it becomes, this private space becomes a social space on occasion. They even have potluck dinners, and it's a real scene. So I really think this is wonderful that he just said, hell, I'm going to make my own playground in my front yard. And here's another example of a kind of social gathering of homes, of social connection between homes. I think too often we think of single family homes as being isolated or separated from each other and having lots of land around them. And they don't have to be. They can hold hands. And Ross Chapin, his architect, has written a book about this and is sort of the pioneer of this idea of pocket neighborhoods where you have single family homes, but they often have their own private outdoor space like a balcony or porch, but they gather around a common lawn, and which is a kind of big shared porch where the children can play safely. So I love that kind of layering of, they're basically thresholds from ones that are associated just with the home to one that you share with a whole grouping, a clustering of houses. And I'm hoping that we in the US can start exploring this more, kind of like you see in co-housing developments, where we can not see the single family home as being so separate, but as part of a community and building that community. So I wanted to look a little bit at how we make these outdoor spaces and how you sort of merge inside and outside. And I think creating flexible boundaries between inside and out is important, walls that fold away. And, I think from my experience, I've seen that outdoor spaces are used much more often if there are few or no level changes between in and out, because they're more easily accessible. This is a house where the walls fold away in this breezeway, and the back area of the house backyard opens up to a roof terrace on the other side with this amazing view of a lake beyond. So this house, which I designed with Sarah Suzanka, was really came from the point of view of trying to make rooms that you move throughout the site, some inside and some outside, and weaving them together, moving through inside, outdoor rooms to indoor rooms to outdoor rooms again, and trying to get as many sizes incorporated as possible. So you move between the garage and the house, and then you go into the entrance and the breezeway, and then there's little places like this that are underneath the roof for just one or two chairs. And it's a wonderful house because it's very dynamic. It's got all of these dynamic walls, this breezeway which opens up completely so that it operates almost as two separate pieces of the house. But then those doors can close up and become a glass connection, or you can open them and a phantom screen comes down and it becomes a screened connection. So more like a screened porch. And the same kinds of options are available for this porch off the south end of the house, where you can bring these phantom screens down and it becomes a screen porch, or they lift up and it's just a covered porch. So the idea of the flexible boundaries of the outdoor space itself allow you to use it throughout the year under different conditions. And I think that's something really to explore so that these spaces are more useful. This is a sunroom I did where glass panels slide into a solid pocket in the summer, so it becomes a screen porch, but in the winter that comes out and it becomes a glassed-in sunroom. And this is a screen porch and deck designed by Tom Barry that also works really hard and earns its keep and is really useful. So those screen panels that enclose the porch are just held in place by small little simple wooden pegs, and they come out so that it becomes a roofed area with a deck next to it. And those screened panels just stack nicely above that storage closet there on the porch. That allows this kind of space where it's open on the sides, and it also allows big gatherings of people like this one, which I think was a celebration of his son's graduation or the prom or something, and the whole neighborhood came out. So when you have more flexibility and you have more choice, it means more use, and it can accommodate so many more occasions and types of gathering. This is a simple kind of ranch house box, the original box, and that was sort of, these people were stuck inside basically and wanted to come out into their garden. So we added just a simple, small kind of greenhouse addition, and it made all the difference for how they inhabit their house and their yard. Adding this one little in-between layer that drew them outside, and now they can spend time out there. And they also have this flexible boundary, a sunroom that accommodates all seasons and types of weather. They can have screened at the bottom and closed at the top, or screened at the top and closed at the bottom, or all closed up in the winter like a sunroom. So this is a project I did for downtown Durham. And here, like in most of the houses I designed, paying attention to the outdoor space and their exposure is important. So here I made a special effort to try to design different kinds of spaces depending on, which way they were facing. And you could occupy them each differently at different times of year. So it's got, wraparound porch, roof decks, it's got everything. This house extends in all directions and provides easily accessible adjacent outdoor spaces for almost every room in the house, with all kinds of secret gardens and interior gardens. Whoops, sorry. So this is the front porch that aligns with a whole pattern of front porches along this street that you enter in. On the west side, and then you come into the big kitchen, dining, living area, and it opens on to mostly a northern-facing wraparound porch that's really good for summertime. And the opposite side of this space opens onto a sunny southern courtyard, which is probably used more often in the wintertime. And then upstairs, this master bedroom, has a balcony that faces west and has a wonderful view of downtown Durham, a sort of distant view. So you feel connected to the city on this side. And then on the other end, upstairs, on the eastern side, you have a more close-up view of the street it's on and the neighboring houses down into the neighborhood, and this amazing green roof. So you can walk around this house and move in and out between indoor and outdoor rooms and go through a whole series of secret gardens and sliding panels. So walking around the outside of the house is just as enriching and comfortable as it is on the inside. And there's so many, fenced in gardens, private gardens. This is another bedroom on the first floor, master bedroom, with this garden is shared with the bedroom and the bathroom. So even the bathroom has an outdoor space and shower associated with it. And the hot tub, which has its own kind of space that's shaded from the sun and for privacy, with kind of a slatted room. So we took the same materials from the house and put space in between the wood to make a kind of slatted enclosure for this outdoor room. So that was a kind of something I wanted to talk about in terms of creating outdoor rooms, is dissolving the built edges. So you don't build outdoor rooms typically in the same way that you would build interior rooms. I always try to introduce some space there, sort of open it up like we've done here in this slatted room, and have it sort of dissolve into the landscape, which really takes a kind of different mindset than maybe many architects or builders have. So opening up space to let nature fill in, dissolving these edges like this, I think is what really is a wonderful way to integrate with what's around you. This is an example of a house that had a solid kind of vinyl entry canopy. And just by taking that off and turning into a trellis, it made so much difference. Just again, opening up space and allowing nature to come in and fill in, softening the edges, softening the architecture, and not having it be so solid and hard, I think is a wonderful way to connect it with what's outside. So I've also spent a lot of time thinking about how to use nature as architecture, as a kind of enclosure, like making ceilings out of vines or walls that are made out of vines or nature. And also reconsidering the ground, rather than just seeing the ground as a solid material. What are ways to break it up and allow nature to fill in, to come in, to make sort of softer definitions of the ground, like you see here. So you really have to broaden your palette from built to natural and everything in between, and not just have it be one or the other. And for me, that's been very exciting, how to broaden my palette and think in terms of soft ways to define spaces, define these sort of architectural elements of ground, wall, and roof. Frank Lloyd Wright was good at this, and I also love this idea of what you normally think of as buildings being the strong, hard thing and chopping trees down. Instead, I think this is wonderfully poetic to have the hard building yield to the soft nature and honor it, incorporate it, bring attention to it. So this is a building which it's not a house, but I wanted to include it because it's one I worked on when I was in Japan. And my time in Japan is really what fed my imagination in terms of building with nature and integrating with the site. And this is just a kind of community center, and it illustrates the idea of building partially and leaving room for nature to come in and complete the space. So you don't complete the space all with built material, but you let nature play a role. So it was built in a grape orchards, and it's a series basically of roof terraces. And we constructed this whole mesh of cables that had grapevines grow over these roof terraces and make a ceiling for these outside terraces. So when the grapes are in full bloom, you've got a different kind of enclosure, so that you've got a mottled light, and it's very shaded and wonderful. But then in the winter, when the grapes die back and it opens up and the sun comes in, it's a different kind of space. It's much more open. So I love that dynamic layer, of the ceiling and it really puts you in touch with the seasons and when the grapes are in bloom or on the vine and when they are not. That changing layer, I think, is a very exciting thing to incorporate into buildings. And this is a vineyard. Yes, this is a whole vineyard, orchards. I don't know the right term. Someone's asking about a grape orchard or a vineyard. A vineyard, yes. And even the railings were made out of grapes. So we made a trellis of a lattice work of bamboo, and the grapevines grow up over and become the material of the railing as well. So this building really dissolves and merges into the landscape in a wonderful way. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on roof decks because they're one of my favorite spaces. And here's one where this house in Durham, again, where we've got a wooden deck and then a landscaped green roof beyond with native plants. And we purposely used a clear glass railing here so that they would make the railing disappear and basically have a sort of contrast and merging of the two. This one, we've got this meeting of wood and greenery, and we bounded this green roof with concrete pavers. This was done by Living Roofs in Asheville, North Carolina. And this is just showing, because I know this is Fine Homebuilding, where you always want to know the guts and how things are made. I wanted to give you this little bit. And this is showing the drainage material underneath and us installing the planted roof. Whoops, sorry. And then this is another project I did where this was using, I think, the Bison innovative deck system. And this is Ipe, and this is a house full of screen porches and balconies and cable rails. And these are very easy to assemble, just pallets that sit on top of pedestals that are on a TPO membrane. And this whole roof is drained via scuppers. This is another little detail. This is the house I did with Sarah Suzanka that has a more robust substrate with a plastic grate that drains down below. And the reason we had to do that was because we were using stone pavers for the material of the roof deck. So those are just 3 different examples of how to do roof decks, which can be very tricky and are not cheap generally, but they sure do make a difference. And I love the idea of making a new ground up above instead of a roof and taking advantage of that space. So in creating outdoor rooms, this is just showing this idea of adding the layers and having it dissolve and breaking down that box, the exterior wall of the box. So this is a house that basically just had a hard edge to it with a sidewalk running along the front of it. So just by adding a screen porch and reconfiguring that sidewalk into a flagstone patio, it transformed this house and how it connected to the site and how they lived on it. We added a trellis, again, sort of opening up the roof. And it's a completely different experience if you look at this picture on the lower right and how you move through versus before, when it was just a hard edge with brick and vinyl and a sidewalk. Of course, the materials made a big difference too. We're using flagstone and more natural materials. But sometimes it's just a simple move, like adding that porch and trellis and redoing the outdoor space that can make a huge difference in a home, just adding those layers. And another way of creating outdoor rooms and moving from an object to a place is using building blocks to enclose these outdoor rooms. And it can be parts of the building, or it can be just a carport or a shed or neighboring buildings. So I just wanted to show some examples of that. This is actually a house that I helped my old professor do from NC State. He bought this house in 1975. And so for almost 40 years, is that right? I'm doing the math right? Yeah, he added on to this house, and it really moved from an object to a place, literally. He added on one by one little bits and made these outdoor rooms, different materials, and the transformation was unbelievable. And this is a kind of timeline of that. On the left here is the original house, and then he began to extend it out with trellises and walkways and columns. Again, he really mastered the art of partial building, extending bits of the building out. Here he extended the roof and the porch out to the front. And this is the same shot before and after. That's the garage on the left, where you see that lawn on the before picture, and it's not really a place that's very inviting or that you would hang out. And this is what he did to it on the right, adding trellises and planters and stepped courtyards and walls, and define things in a partial way that I think is really wonderful between built and natural. But working together with nature, it's a real skill. And so now his whole house is surrounded by these amazing outdoor rooms and hallways, and you move around the house in a way that you didn't before, and with all kinds of places to sit. And there's raised garden beds, and it's so much more connected to the site than it was initially, when it was sort of looking like a suburban object sitting on the land. So I've tried to do this in a lot of my projects. This is a house. It's not a very expensive house, but really just by the placement of the carport in relation to the house, I was able to make a kind of entry court that you pass by the carport and enter a back courtyard, and using the hillside as an enclosure of that back area. And then I also layered it, like I was talking before, layered on a patio in back and a porch in front, just sort of thickening that edge of the house. So you come into this courtyard on the back, which is a patio dug into the hillside. So it feels kind of dug in, and then you come into this large kitchen, dining, living area, and then that opens on to a screen porch that projects out into the trees. And so one thing I often try to do is, like, when you make these, you go through the effort to make these indoor outdoor spaces, these porches, is to try to exploit them as much as possible, have the house really benefit from them. So I often have them opening on not just to one space, but as many spaces as possible. So this opens, the kitchen, dining, living spills out, but then it connects to the master bedroom beyond. So both spaces can really take advantage of this outdoor room. And it really does double the square footage of the house. It really expands it tremendously, and it feels like a tree house on this side and, kind of a dug-in patio on the other. This is a very simple, medium budget house. And again, using the carport and its placement as a way to create entrance sequence and a courtyard and back, and weaving these indoor outdoor rooms together as you move through. So there you move past this courtyard, this carport, into the courtyard beyond, and then you come inside, and then there's the screen porch, which opens on to a couple different spaces. It's kind of embedded in the house in that corner. And this is a house which has a different situation, where we didn't really have the room to put a carport or any other buildings there. It was just sort of where it was, pressed up against its neighboring house. But the neighboring house provided a kind of a wall to enclose the outdoor space. And so even though it's a very small house in a tight environment, we made a whole series of cascading outdoor spaces running down the side of the house that transforms how they live there. So they've got a kind of sunken courtyard front area that they hang out in, which is right by the street, and it is the most public space. And then they've got this mid-level spot halfway down, and then it continues on down to the bottom most private space in the back. And so they can decide where they want to be and how public or private they want to be, how they want to occupy it. But I really think they use these outdoor spaces as much as the indoor spaces. And so the house does not feel small to them because they have all these different choices. And lastly, I wanted to say, you could obviously just create outdoor rooms by using walls or fences, versus other buildings. And there's so many ways to define an outdoor room. And the trick, again, is to get the right degree of enclosure, not too little, not too much. So this is a beautiful house designed by Frank Harmon, and he simply uses walls and fences to define the outdoor rooms. And ironically, they make your outdoor space feel bigger. You might think, oh, I don't want to fence in or wall in my yard. It'll feel too tight, but it doesn't. It makes it more room-like and makes it feel bigger, and you use it more when it has that definition versus just sort of bleeding out to the street or a driveway or something. And these fences and walls, I learned a lot about them working in Japan, but they allow you to use your entire lot. So if you have, say, a close by neighbor, which I have, or cars, which I have, you could put a fence there and pretty much erase them. So you're unaware of that thing that's next to you, the neighbor or the car. And so you can use your lot right up to that fence where you wouldn't otherwise. So my neighbor and I can be just a couple of feet apart from each other, but we're unaware of each other because of the screen. And so we're able to use the whole lot. But if there was no fence there, I wouldn't go near the property line as much, or I wouldn't go near those cars. So this is really important, I think, is screening off and creating these interior gardens and outdoor spaces. And I wanted to say that even 5 feet is useful. This is these don't have to be leftover spaces. This is a house where they're growing tomatoes in that 5-foot space, and another house where they actually open their shower and have an outdoor shower just within 5 feet. And this is my fence outside my desk, and it's amazing what happens in just that small space. I've got a bird feeder there. I've got flowering vines. You have all kinds of animals that appear. That's my dog. So just within 5 feet, having that up close fence is a wonderful kind of window in which nature and life can appear. And so I would like to just make the point that our outdoor spaces are too often poorly used and often given over to cars instead of people. And I think it's a shame, because I think in general, we're often too isolated from one another, and that so making outdoor spaces where kids can meet and play with each other, and we have a more social connection, a more connection with nature, is something that all homes could really benefit from. And it makes me sad when I see environments like this one, where I feel like they're not using the outdoor space as well as they should or could. Because this kind of social connection, I think, is something we all crave, and making those outdoor spaces comfortable connect us to our neighbors. And they also connect us to the natural world around us, the seasons, weather, time of day. And you end up with a home which is much more integrated with its site and taking full advantage of it, instead of sitting apart as a disconnected object with people trapped inside it. So my sort of call to action is for you to break out of your homes, break out, see what's outside, make places that you want to be in, explore what kinds of living that you can do outside. And because so many of these outdoor spaces are just partially built, they're half built, you can come in and change them. They're dynamic, they're alive, they're where you can see the inside life of the people that live around you get expressed on the outside and come outside, like Maya here, who lives down the street from me. So she's constantly occupying her porch in innovative ways, and she has a whole series of equipment. Here she's performing the flying trapeze on her own personal circus here. And I'm just so grateful to walk down the street and see this sort of human life coming outside instead of being trapped inside. And making these kinds of spaces are really what makes this happen. So I think that is it for me. And we can go to any questions that came in.
Hi, Tina. So thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And we do have a bunch of questions. A bunch of them were circling around material choices. Like people were asking about
sorry, Bob,
surface-
do I need to take these slides off, or are they?
No, I mean, you can keep them up there.
Okay,
You might as well.
Okay.
So the first one was about pavers or floor surfaces. Another one was about wood. Another one was about patio door manufacturers. So if you could kind of like talk about, if you have any preferences or favorites, or how you choose those sorts of things.
Okay. So for the first was about pavers and
pavers and surface floor, flooring
surface
surfaces.
floor. Okay. Yeah. I mean, when you have, of course, patios that are made out of hard materials like flagstone, in my view, are easier to maintain and versus a deck or wood. I have to say that, like in this house here, where Maya is doing her circus, on the roof deck up there, they experimented with using a recycled milk jug material that was not the best choice. I think they were trying to be sort of cutting edge. And so it's a plastic that synthetic material that expands and contracts. And so that didn't work out. So I would just say being a little conservative about what you use in terms of maintenance, because it is outside. So the weather makes a difference, and it's more susceptible to temperature change. One of the materials I've sort of fallen in love with lately is thermally modified wood. And so the house that you saw in Durham that had the slatted wood around the hot tub and on the floor, all of that was thermally modified ash, which I like because you don't have to put any kind of sealer on it generally. And it's sort of maintenance free. And what other pavers, or someone asking about?
Well, actually, before you go on to that, I was curious. Where do you, is that something you have to order special? I mean, is that available locally? That thermally modified wood?
It's available in a lot of different places. You can get it in North Carolina, which is where I am, but I know you can also get it up in Pennsylvania. I think Bailey Wood might be a company, but if you Google thermally modified wood, you can find several manufacturers that do that, where they sort of bake the sugars out of the wood, and so it doesn't mildew. And was there other paver?
Another question was actually with patio doors. Like obviously, your connection to the outdoors is important, so I imagine door choices are important too.
Right. So, everyone probably has their favorite manufacturers. I don't know if I would endorse anyone particularly, but it can be sort of trial and error, especially if you're doing folding doors. So I've had some mishaps with a few that some are more cumbersome than others. We use Marvin a lot, and that's worked out well. And sliding patio doors can be a little bit trickier, but there are some that have gone out of business, so I can't really recommend them. But I would say, that I'm hesitant to be critical.
No, that's okay.
Brands.
Yeah, you don't have to go into it.
I've used sliding doors and of course French doors, and then the more expensive ones are the folding doors. For sure. But I think that the best thing there is to talk with people who've had good success with them, and that kind of history, and go see it and try it yourself, basically.
Okay. Another person asked, they have a very limited size backyard, but they're really trying to create multiple zones in it, and they're wondering, if you're limited in space, is it how do you sort of define those spaces? Like they were wondering whether you should have different levels, or if you're really in a limited space, if that's going to sort of make things feel too small.
It depends on the exact situation, but I think level changes are a good way to distinguish areas. The way I would test it out is like, what would you like to be able to do in the backyard, and what kinds of sizes of groups would you like to accommodate? So I think just thinking in terms of that, maybe two people sitting, and again, thinking, we like to have coffee in the morning, and we have this view, and then we like to have family dinners over here, and just like you would sort of the interior of your house, the view and the sun and the size of the group, and sort of test those scenarios out in your yard. But I also think that I've seen many people go too hard with their backyard. So you want nature, and you want some greenery, and you want trees. And so just to make sure you allow for that, because we're in a very, again, tight neighborhood, but we installed a small fish pond, and we have some just the pleasure we get out of seeing birds and nature come into our urban neighborhood is really gratifying. So you want to leave enough kind of landscape in order to attract, wildlife.
For sure. One of the visitors, the presentation, was asking if you can talk a little bit about the sort of workflow design process, like how you, when you sort of come up with it, when you have presented with a design challenge, sort of how do you work through it?
Like in terms of outdoor spaces, or just in general?
I think it's more sort of your design process.
Okay. So, I generally design homes like both from the inside out and from the outside in. So I of course start with the clients and how they live and how they like to live and their daily routines and get a sense of that. And that's sort of how it starts from the inside. But then I also really spend a lot of time on the site and thinking how I can connect with everything I can around me, around on that site in terms of all scales. So like distant views and how it connects maybe to a sidewalk or how you approach it. And think about the whole spectrum from public to private and kind of map the site itself, you know, and what sort of really paying attention to what's already there before you come in with a design. So I think that's one thing that's often missed is just like coming up with an idea or using an idea you had before, but really just like trying to get in touch with the most wonderful parts of the site that are there. And then also talking to the homeowners about what they see in the site and what parts of it they like most. And so that, you know, sort of the Frank Lloyd Wright attitude of like trying to enhance the best parts of the site and gather the house around it and bring them close, and to see the house as a way to experience the site is how I see it. So you're sort of really moving through both of them. You see a tree trunk very differently when it's framed by a window than when it's out by itself. So how you can really enhance and intensify people's experience of nature and the site around them via the house. It's, you know, and then I sort of map that the lifestyle and the site, and then try to bring them together. And a lot of it's generated by the movement through and the approach and the movement through the house and the site and trying to integrate them. And I really do. I mean, I know that many people don't, but maybe it's my experience in Japan, but it's just really think in terms of making these outdoor rooms. Because I know that will bring people out and connect them with their site versus an object, you know. And then, I mean, my criticism of architects too often is like I'm making this perfect object and it's got these aesthetics to it, but I'm really more about how you live there and how you occupy the whole site. So I see the whole site as your home, not just the building and up to your exterior walls, but all the way up to your property line. That's your home. And hopefully you connect even beyond, you know, and it's awareness of where you live. It sort of locates you in this place. This is where you're dwelling.
That's great. You had spoken early on about how important it is to get the size of those soft spaces right. And someone asked something about, you know, how you determine sort of, let's say you've got a wall next to, you know, a wall of a building, and you're building a patio next to it, and how important is it to get the relationship between the size of the patio and the size of the wall?
Well, you basically try to figure out what is you want to do there. Like just like you would say, how do you decide the size of a dining room? You know, or how, you know, maybe you have a dining room table you want to incorporate, or, you know, you think about human activity and what kinds of space it needs. And so if it's only, you've only got 4 feet, then maybe it's just going to accommodate certain kind of activities, or 2 chairs and a table versus a bigger table, or maybe it's a ping pong table. Or, I mean, I think size and function are very much connected. And so I basically test out scenarios, drawing furniture and drawing and imagining what would happen in spaces. And so I try to come up with a size that allows for the most capacity, has the most capacity to be sort of inhabited in many different ways as possible. But maybe you want a little retreat for just 2 people. I mean, just trying to think about projecting how you're going to use it, and getting that size right. Because if you make it too small, you can't use it for certain things. And just being aware of that. And basically, it's amazing what just getting out a tape measure will do, and just test it out.
Yeah, and I imagine, like you said, it's more important to get the proportions based on how you're going to use it, and you could probably always include other landscape or architectural elements to change the feel for it.
Yeah, and you don't have to define it by building. It can be by vegetation, or I just think that trying to broaden your palette so you think beyond just walls and building. It's wonderful to design it with soft materials as well. And I think your eyesight and sort of pretend sitting there. I mean, one of the things that drives me crazy is going to a beautiful place and having the railing of a deck or somewhere be right at eye level. And so it's sad. So just thinking about, your view when you're occupying the space, when you're sitting or however you're going to use it.
Sure. So, you were talking earlier about how when you're designing a full house on a site, you can choose to use things like outbuildings and other structures in your overall plan for creating some of those spaces if you have a big open lot. But what if you had a small house and you had a big blank slate of a backyard? How would you go about sort of like deciding how to chunk up that sort of blank slate?
Well, again, it's sort of inside out, outside in. So it's like, you think about the interior spaces of the home and how they will spill out. So you generally, if you have a kitchen, you would want an eating area, just like you want the dining room next to the kitchen, then you probably want an outdoor eating area next to the kitchen or the dining room. So just taking those functions that are inside and thinking about how they can happen outside. And they have to typically be adjacent to each other. So, and if you have a bedroom back there, what kind of outdoor space could that enjoy? Maybe it needs to be a private garden, or maybe you want a hot tub, or just imagining what you can do outside. But it's really informed by the interior space, because the idea is sort of how the inside life spills out. So the inside, it's like turning the house inside out. It comes out and you make the outdoor rooms like the indoor ones, and you can make them merge even. So we've got big double doors here where the living room and the outdoor patio become basically one space when we have a party. So I think the existing house will really inform that. And then also the orientation, like where you might want to sit in the evening or the morning, where the sun is, where the views are. If you've got an ugly view, or you've got noisy neighbors, or, all those things that are in the world around you, they come in and shape the space as well to decide what kind of space you'll create on the outside. So it's really that dual inside coming out and the outside affecting, what you're doing inside in your property.
Sounds great. So someone commented on, and I know you're in a warmer climate than we are up here in Connecticut, that you've got a lot of those spaces that have these big expanses of glass opening up onto the outside, and how does that factor in from a energy perspective to sort of make these connections so bright and open to these outdoor spaces? Like, obviously you're going to have to deal with better windows and doors and that sort of thing
when you have big expanses of glass.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's always kind of a struggle, I think probably the most efficient house would be just a box with no windows. So it's a trade-off, of course, we all know that. But so you just have to be wise in where and how you place them. And shading the southern windows from the southern sun. And I think that also determines how you treat the outside in your outside spaces. Is taking care of those windows. The safest place to have a window in terms of direct sun is on the north side, but that's not, I know, an efficient place to put them. So I think windows just in general are a compromise, but as humans, we need them. And you just have to, get the most efficient ones and put them in the places where it really counts, and then shade them from heat gain and heat loss. Try to deal with both of those.
Now, this next question, I know you kind of really covered it quite a bit here and there throughout the presentation, and probably the answer is sort of it depends. But someone asked, wood fencing or landscaping for privacy screening.
Well, you could do either. They can both work. I mean, the obvious answers are that planting will take longer, and you can build a fence and then grow something on it and have it become a green fence. But at least what's nice about building something is that you've got that screen up right away, and then you can soften it with stuff growing on it later. But it's maybe more expensive or more of a maintenance issue. I mean, it depends on also the space you have. So I'm in a tight urban setting, kind of, urban downtown neighborhood. And so I don't have the space to grow a fat, bush or maybe a Leland cypress or something, or a pine tree. And it's just, I don't have that width. And so I have mainly built fences and then grown flowering vines on them. So I think it depends on how much dimension you have, and maybe your budget, and then just how quickly you want that screen up there. And I have a real good suggestion for a fence, actually. That's, I don't know if you can see it, but it's out my window. It's a I don't think that works. And anyway, it's basically you put these 4x4s in the ground, and then every 5 or 6 feet, and then you take 1x4s and weave them in and out. It's very easy.
Oh,
they
yeah.
kind of
I've
stay
seen
in
those
place.
before.
Yeah,
that's sort of like not quite mid-century modern, but I feel like I've seen that in a lot of older homes where those woven fences.
Yeah, I like them because they are weaving, and they're easy to do. Like they're DIY, and they stay in place before you even screw them, so you can let them shrink and then screw them in place.
Nice. Someone asked, do you have any books that feature any of your work? Because everyone seems very excited to see all of the examples of your work.
Well, Rob, let's do one.
I think that'd be great. I'll talk to Peter Chapman in the books department.
Yeah, pitch that to your book guy. I'd be happy. I have not yet, but would love to. Honestly, I would love to share these ideas because I have built them up over the years, and I would love to share them with more people.
Yeah, great. So I think we're getting to the end of the list here, and the end of our time slot here. But one question: I know you focused a lot on natural materials in everything you've shown, and someone asked if you have any opinions about using synthetic materials in the landscape, in decking or whatever.
No real strong opinions. I mean, I in trying to tie your house to the site, I do like the idea of using the materials that are already on the site, because then it just merges with the site more naturally. And so if you can, if stone is naturally there, and using stone in your landscape, I mean, it's just, obvious that you're using the same materials as what's already there. And that I think is really effective in terms of connecting with the site. But the only, I don't have real strong opinions. The only thing I saw that was sort of a big mistake for us was this roof deck down the street where they use those milk jugs. It was being featured on the Discovery Channel, the Green Planet or something. And so they were pushing new materials, and they tried this one out, and it didn't work out. So it also shocked people, like when you're walking on the roof deck. The static. And then it was hot in the summer, and then it shrunk. And so it really turned like into this hostile decking material. So I would just say be wary of, getting too adventurous with that stuff. But I've generally used sort of natural materials. Yeah. So I can't say, I think also the more native and local materials, the better, and the more connected to where you are, to your place, I think is always a good way to go.
For sure. Well, I think I can speak for probably everybody else that saw this presentation that I'm inspired to go out and walk around my yard and look for opportunities to do stuff on my own property. And I just really want to thank you so much for the presentation. It's just been a joy to have you here with us this evening. But again, I wanted to thank Fine for sponsoring the presentation. Again, you can go to fineinc.com to check out their their products. And thank you everybody for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.